Now, Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa won a second term in last week's disputed elections. The SADC observer mission denounced the polls, saying they fell short of the acceptable standard. Intimidation and shortage of ballots were just some of the issues raised by observers. South Africa and the US have separately noted the observers' concerns, while China congratulated the re-elected Zimbabwean leader. Now, Mnangagwa has encouraged those with complaints about the results to go to court. And joining me now is Dr. Frank Lekaba to give us his analysis. Dr. Lekaba, thank you so much for your time and a very warm good morning to you. I mean, let's talk about, I suppose, the reaction to the independent observers' reports. Most of them saying that these elections were not free, they were not fair, there was a lot of intimidation, unlawful arrests made, just amongst other things. Yet it seems the reaction expected, does not match what I suppose the observers were hoping to achieve, at least from SADC and the AU. How would you rate the SADC community and how they've received the observers' report?
Okay, no, thank you very much. I just did a glance and I looked at the SADC report, the observer missions report on the elections in Zimbabwe. I think the report is comprehensive. It is not scathing that much, but it is making observations on the key concerns that have already been raised in the media and elsewhere in Zimbabwe, particularly issues around voters' roll, the issues of the space, openness of the space to campaign. You remember one rally was disrupted, the rally of Nelson Chamisa, CCC, was disrupted. So the observer mission makes note of all of these issues and it makes recommendations, which for me is not something very unpalatable. It's something that can take Zimbabwe to have a better elections in the next cycle of the elections. So it's not a scathing report, and I saw the report, the other press statement from SADC owning up to the report that was released by the observer mission. These are preliminary findings, by the way. And remember, the electoral cycle has got 3 phases. So the report is basically about 2 phases of the elections: the pre-elections, the election day. Now they are observing the post-elections environment to see how the elections are the results of the elections are being received by the stakeholders, and how then the government is handling all of this. So the observer mission is still there. It's observing the post-electoral phase of the elections. And it is, I think after that, it will give us, in a space of about 30 days, give us a full report. But this is for the first time SADC takes this kind of, a very kind of direct messaging on the kinds of credibility of elections in Zimbabwe. I think for the previous elections, SADC was not so direct in terms of questioning the credibility of the elections.
How do you rate, some of these SADC leaders will react to the results? The results, one, but also the report by the observers, two. We've seen a tweet by President Cyril Ramaphosa, I think it's a line or two, congratulating President Emmerson Mnangagwa on his re-election. Of course, much to a lot of criticism, even right here on South African soil, from some of the opposition leaders, such as Mmusi Maimane, who retweeted saying, delete this. It's time to speak out against, some of the findings that were provided for in that report by the observers. But besides Ramaphosa, and just including other presidents and leaders, how do you think they will react, at least publicly so?
The leaders of the region will be relying too much on the report of the observer mission, because that observer mission is guided by the SADC's principles on democratic elections. So I think the biggest guidance here, and I think the leaders will be waiting for that full report. In some instances, they might come out to emphasize that let us hang on and listen to because there's been a backlash from the leaders in Zimbabwe. They were stressing some dissatisfaction, not so particularly on the SADC observer mission, but they have kind of taken a hardline stance towards what the reports of the observer missions have been coming, the preliminary reports. So I think the leaders of SADC then are going to be very careful in what they pronounce here, and they are going to follow what the observer mission has said. The observer mission has not disqualified the results or raised issues with regards to the results. Like I said, this report is basically on the observations around how the elections were conducted, how the pre-election phase was conducted. But as to the post-election phase now, we're still yet to find out what the observer mission is going to say. So I think the leaders in the region will also be careful to listen to the observer mission and get that report. And then from there, I think is when they will now make their statements very publicly. I think in the region is a common thing that they would like to do things along the lines of the SADC resolution. So whatever SADC decides on, that's what the leaders of the region will do. With the exception of Botswana, especially under eNCA, but the tradition has always been, let's follow what SADC says. So I think the leaders now are just waiting for that report, the full report from the observer mission.
Well, those are SADC leaders looking from the outside in, but for those leaders that partook in the elections, obviously the Triple C party are not too happy with the results. We know Nelson Chamisa coming second with around 44% of the results from the elections, just behind Emerson Mnangagwa's 53% approximately. What kind of a fight do you think they will put as the opposition party? Nelson Chamisa as the leader as well. It goes without saying that Emerson Mnangagwa will not let this go down without, of course, retaliating as well and defending his win. Further saying that whoever has a problem or a complaint or concerns with the election results needs to head over to the courts. But in your view, how do you think Nelson Chamisa and his party will handle this?
Yeah, I think Chamisa is not going to go the legal route. They've attempted in the past, 2018, they went the legal route to contest the elections results, but they didn't. It was not forthcoming for their side. I don't think they would. He has already said that he doesn't recognize the results. He doesn't recognize the win of Mnangagwa. He has made his views public about what is happening there. He has made his opinions known about how he received the election results. But I think one thing to take away from the observer missions is the issue on the impartiality of the courts. The observer mission says this, but in a very calculated manner, that before the elections, there were some subsidies that were handed out to the judiciary. So this, to a certain extent, can create a doubt on the impartiality of the judiciary, particularly when you look at how they handled one of the candidates, Masukera, if I'm not wrong, how they handled his application to be allowed to contest in the elections. So Chamisa is not going to go with the election, with the courts, but taking lessons from the continent, I think the courts are the only final arbiter on matters of this nature. Looking at the elections, I think of 2018 in Kenya, it was the first time that the court annulled the election results. So this has been a trend in the continent that the final say comes from the court as far as how the election outcomes are accepted in the country.
We'll leave it there. I appreciate you speaking to me about this, Dr. Frank Lekaba, a senior from the Wits School of Governance. Thank you so much for joining me right here on NewsLink.